Ever wonder why someone's smile makes you feel uneasy, even when their words are kind? Or why a friend's silence in the middle of a conversation feels louder than shouting? There's a whole world of communication happening just beneath the surface, constantly humming in the background, even when no one's speaking. The truth is, your body never really stops talking. The secrets behind the messages we send without even trying? They're right here, waiting for you to learn them. Because once you understand nonverbal communication, you stop second-guessing what someone really meant, and start recognizing the signs your intuition has been picking up all along. And here's something that might just make you sit up straighter. Studies have found that up to 93% of communication can be nonverbal. That includes tone of voice, facial expressions, posture, everything that doesn't involve your actual words. Yep. You might be surprised to learn that your body is constantly speaking for you, even when you think you're keeping it together. Picture this: you're in a room full of people, warm light bouncing softly off the walls, low music humming in the background. You're saying nothing, but you feel someone's gaze, sense someone's mood, and maybe adjust your stance without even realizing it. That's nonverbal communication doing its quiet magic. Here's your reality check. You probably won't know this, but people have made entire judgments about you before you've even said hello. Your handshake, your posture, the way you tilt your head, it all adds up, instantly and invisibly. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. So, let's begin with a very simple truth. Words are not everything. In fact, they're not even most things. Imagine saying, "I'm fine," with your arms crossed, your face stiff, your tone flat. Your words say one thing, but your body screams another. Your listener, whether they realize it or not, is picking up the disconnect. It's not always what you say. It's how you say it, and how your body carries the message. Psychologist Albert Mehrabian's classic research found that communication about feelings and attitudes breaks down roughly like this: 7% verbal, 38% vocal, tone, and 55% style. Now, people have debated the exact breakdown for years, and yes, it only applies in specific contexts, like when you're talking about your emotions, but the takeaway remains clear: your nonverbal cues matter, a lot. Here's something interesting. Babies start picking up on nonverbal communication before they can understand words. In fact, newborns as young as a few hours old prefer looking at faces and will mimic expressions by just a few months in. It's instinctual. You don't learn how to interpret facial expressions, you're wired to. So when people say, "Trust your gut," there's some serious science backing it up. But there remains considerable disagreement about whether nonverbal communication is universally understood or learned through culture and context. For instance, is a smile always a sign of friendliness? Well, not always. Some cultures use smiling in ways that reflect politeness, embarrassment, or even discomfort. Still, the basic point holds: your body has a language of its own, and it's constantly writing its message across space, whether you want it to or not. Think about all the little moments. You nod slightly when someone's talking, encouraging them to go on. You lean back when someone invades your space. You mirror someone's posture when you're getting along. These micro movements are small, but they create entire emotional landscapes between people. Without them, we're left with the robotic coldness of a teleprompter. And you might not realize it, but nonverbal cues are often more honest than verbal ones. If you say, "I'm happy," while frowning, people won't believe your words. They'll believe your face. In fact, even trained actors sometimes have trouble keeping their body language consistent with their lines. Why? Because it takes active effort to suppress what your body naturally wants to reveal. Here's a quirky detail: certain animals, like dogs, can read human nonverbal communication better than chimps, our actual biological cousins. Why? Because dogs evolved alongside humans, adapting to our gestures, facial expressions, and tones of voice. Your pet might not understand your words, but they can absolutely tell when you're upset. Sometimes better than your partner. So where does this leave you? It leaves you in a world where every gesture, every raised brow, every subtle shift of the shoulders can be part of a hidden dialogue. Nonverbal cues aren't just decorative, they're decisive. They can reveal sincerity or deception, interest or boredom, connection or distance. And here's a fun bit: the field of nonverbal communication is still relatively young compared to other areas of psychology. That means many researchers are still actively arguing about definitions, theories, and methods. One long-standing controversy surrounds how much nonverbal behavior is instinctual versus learned, and how much can be consciously controlled. So yes, the next time someone says, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it," give them a gold star. They're absolutely right. Your body's tone, through posture, facial expression, and gestures, isn't just speaking, it might be yelling. As your mind drifts deeper, another layer opens. If words are only part of the message, then where do your eyes fit in? Your eyes aren't just windows to your soul, they're massive, blinking neon signs announcing your every emotional detour, even the ones you didn't mean to reveal. You probably think you're pretty good at keeping a poker face, right? Well, unless you're actively trained to mask your eye behavior, you're leaking signals like a busted garden hose. Let's start with eye contact. You might not think twice about it, but it's one of the most loaded nonverbal cues out there. Making too much eye contact? Creepy. Too little? Suspicious. Just the right amount? Instant social harmony. It's a tightrope walk, one you perform dozens of times a day without realizing it. A famous study by psychologist Michael Argyle showed that mutual gaze promotes feelings of connection and trust. When someone looks you in the eyes, and you meet their gaze evenly, your brain actually releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This is why a moment of locked eyes across a room can feel electric. It's not just attraction, it's chemical. But here's the twist: there remains considerable disagreement about how much eye contact is optimal. Some research says 3 seconds is perfect. Others argue for longer or shorter, depending on cultural context, personality type, and power dynamics. In Japan, for instance, prolonged eye contact can be seen as disrespectful. In the US, it's expected. And in Italy? Prepare for a staring contest that could last your whole espresso. Now, blink rate, something you usually never think about, actually says a lot. Under stress or when lying, your blink rate often increases. But strangely enough, when you're intensely focused or engaged, your blink rate drops. That's right. You blink less when you're all in. Think of a poker player holding a strong hand. They stare, unblinking, because their brain is hyper-focused on keeping cool. Here's something interesting. The pupils of your eyes dilate when you're looking at someone you like, or even when you're looking at something aesthetically pleasing, like a painting, a sunset, or that perfect little slice of cheesecake. Your pupils expand involuntarily. So, when you're talking to someone and their pupils look a little wider than usual, yeah, they're into you. Or your dessert. But not everything is so straightforward. Just a quirky detail: people with larger pupils are often rated as more attractive by others. Why? Possibly because the human brain subconsciously links pupil dilation with arousal and engagement, which are positive social signals. Fun fact: in the Middle Ages, women actually used belladonna, a toxic plant, to dilate their pupils and appear more alluring. Beauty really has its dark sides. Now, you probably use eye movement as a cue for truthfulness. You've heard the cliché: if someone looks up and to the left, they're lying, right? Not so fast. That theory has been widely debunked. There's no reliable scientific evidence that specific eye directions correlate to lies. The issue has sparked significant intellectual debate, especially among body language experts and skeptics. Bottom line: don't accuse your friend of fibbing just because their eyes wandered mid-sentence. They might have just remembered they left the oven on. But here's where it gets a little freaky. Eye behavior is often one of the first things your brain registers about another person. Even infants can recognize eye direction and follow it, what's called joint attention. This shared gaze becomes the foundation for learning language and social behavior. Without it, communication can struggle to take root. That's why disruptions in eye contact are a core diagnostic marker in autism spectrum disorders. Let's not skip over eye narrowing and widening, those little muscle movements that give away a universe of reactions. When someone's eyes widen, it often signals surprise, fear, or deep interest. Narrowed eyes, on the other hand, may indicate suspicion, anger, or judgment. Think of the last time someone gave you the squint. You felt it. You knew. Words were unnecessary. Eye rolls? Oof. Universally known, universally despised. Rolling your eyes isn't just dismissive, it's basically an emotional slap. Relationship experts like John Gottman consider contempt, often expressed non-verbally through gestures like eye rolls, one of the strongest predictors of relationship failure. So next time you feel the urge to roll those eyes, maybe just blink slowly instead. Less drama. More mystery. And speaking of slow blinks, did you know that cats use them to show affection? If your cat gives you a long, lazy blink, they're basically saying, "I trust you." And yes, if you blink back slowly, they might even return it. It's a weirdly adorable way to build cross-species rapport. Now imagine this, you're talking to someone at a party. Their words are friendly, but they keep glancing around the room, eyes darting like they're waiting for an escape route. You instantly sense something's off, even before your brain consciously analyzes it. That's your nonverbal radar kicking in. It catches incongruent eye behavior faster than logic ever could. That shift in energy leads us into something else, how these little signals don't operate in isolation. One eye flick or pupil twitch might mean nothing, but a pattern? A consistent lean, widened eyes, and quick glances? That paints a much clearer picture. So, to recap, your eyes are narrating a parallel story. One that bypasses your lips and goes straight to someone else's limbic system. They say things you might not want to admit out loud, that you're nervous, interested, lying, distracted, or totally crushing. The eyes speak. Loudly. And as you let that settle in, another part of your face starts to stir, small muscles beneath your skin, twitching and tensing without permission. What do those micro-movements say about you? You probably don't realize it, but your face is a theater, always performing, always reacting, even when you think it's still. Every little twitch, every slight raise of an eyebrow, tells a story. And here's where it gets fascinating. Many of these expressions flash across your face in under half a second. They're called micro-expressions, and they betray your true emotions before your brain even has a chance to clean them up for public view. You might think you're controlling your face when you smile politely or raise your eyebrows to act surprised, but those micro-expressions? They're the uninvited guests at your emotional dinner party. Paul Ekman, the psychologist who helped pioneer the study of facial expressions, found that certain expressions, like happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust, are universal. That means people across different cultures, even those with no shared language, recognize them the same way. Ekman's work even helped train security personnel to detect lies at airports by spotting inconsistencies between what someone says and what flashes across their face. Now, you might be asking, but if they're so fast, how do we notice them at all? That's the thing, you don't always notice them consciously. But your body reacts. Your gut gets weird when someone says something that sounds sincere, but their face shows fear for a split second. Your brain might not have the language for it, but it knows something isn't right. Here's something interesting, micro-expressions are so revealing that professional poker players, FBI interrogators, and even therapists train themselves to recognize them. It's like learning to read subtitles for emotions. And yet, here comes the scholarly elbow nudge. There remains considerable disagreement about how reliable these expressions are in high-stakes settings. Can you always trust what you see in a flash of fear or a flicker of disgust? Some critics argue that too much emphasis on micro-expression analysis can lead to misinterpretation, especially if taken out of context. After all, maybe that split-second eyebrow raise wasn't suspicion, it was an itch. But for most people, it's not about perfect accuracy. It's about adding one more puzzle piece to the emotional jigsaw you're always subconsciously solving. Let's talk about one of the most familiar expressions, the raised eyebrow. A single raised brow often signals skepticism, sarcasm, or surprise, depending on the context. And yes, you've probably thrown that look across a room when someone said something deeply questionable. Sometimes, it says more than a 3-paragraph monologue. A furrowed brow? That one's easy: confusion, concern, maybe mild anger. But what makes it tricky is that facial expressions often combine. So a furrowed brow with a tight-lipped smile? That's social discomfort with a sprinkle of forced politeness. A wrinkled nose with raised upper lip? Classic disgust. You might find this surprising: facial expressions aren't just reactions, they can also create emotions. This is known as the facial feedback hypothesis. For example, simply activating the muscles used in smiling can make you feel slightly happier. Even biting on a pen in a way that simulates a smile can boost your mood. Weird, right? Your body doesn't just reflect emotion, it participates in it. Now let's get a little more fringe, shall we? There's a theory that suggests people who've had Botox, especially in areas that restrict muscle movement in the face, may have a slightly dulled ability to empathize. Why? Because their own reduced facial movement interferes with their ability to mirror and recognize others' expressions. It's still debated, but it's a quirky consequence of modern beauty standards bumping up against ancient evolutionary wiring. And here's another gem: your face has 43 muscles. You can use them to create over 10,000 different expressions, though most of us stick to a handy collection of about 15 to 20 that we recycle throughout the day. Unless you're Jim Carrey. Then it's all 10,000, all the time. A long-standing controversy surrounds whether facial expressions are truly innate or shaped more by environment. While Ekman's research supports the universal theory, others argue that emotional expression is also highly influenced by social norms, upbringing, and context. For instance, people in more collectivist cultures may be taught to suppress negative expressions in public to maintain group harmony. Meanwhile, in more individualistic cultures, showing your feelings is practically encouraged. Just look at TikTok. But even when you're suppressing an expression, your face doesn't always cooperate. Think about when you try to fake calm while giving a presentation, but your mouth tightens involuntarily or your eyebrows twitch like they've got something to say. That's your body's version of, "nice try." Let's throw in a quirky tidbit. One of the easiest expressions to fake poorly is surprise. Real surprise is brief, with both eyebrows lifting simultaneously, eyes widening, and the mouth forming an O. Fake surprise usually lingers too long or includes muscle tension that doesn't match the emotion. So next time someone overacts their shock, clock it. Let's not forget the neutral face, or what's often unkindly labeled resting something or other. A neutral face can still be read, often incorrectly. People might interpret a perfectly relaxed expression as judgmental, angry, or bored. Why? Because we project our expectations onto blank slates. A face doesn't have to move to be misread. That leads us to facial asymmetry. People often assume a symmetrical expression is genuine, but real emotions can be messy. Some studies even suggest that the left side of your face, controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, shows emotion more intensely. That's why artistic portraits often favor a subject's left cheek. It's more expressive. Vanity meets neurology. So, here's your takeaway: your face is always talking, even when your lips aren't. It whispers secrets, it blurts emotions, and sometimes it completely rats you out. But it also connects you. It says the things you're too scared to say out loud. The twitch, the grin, the eye crinkle, they're your emotional subtitles. As we linger here, softening the edges of awareness, you start to feel how your smile, real or rehearsed, sends ripples through the room. What if the difference between a genuine connection and a social misfire lives in those barely there movements around your mouth? Let's take a slow breath here, because now we're diving into something deceptively simple: the smile. It seems so basic, doesn't it? Just a little upward tug at the corners of your mouth. Easy. Instinctive. But hold on to that thought, because your smile has layers. Like lasagna. Or that coworker who smiles a lot but secretly hates everyone in accounting. At first glance, a smile is the universal signal of happiness, friendliness, and approachability. But once you learn to really look, you'll realize not all smiles are created equal. Some are genuine. Some are social. And some are just plain shady. Here's where we get technical. A genuine smile, called the Duchenne smile, involves both the zygomatic major, the muscle that lifts the corners of your mouth, and the orbicularis oculi, the one that crinkles the eyes. That crinkle? That's your authenticity meter. If someone's mouth is smiling but their eyes look dead, what you're seeing is likely a non-Duchenne smile, a fake one. Paul Ekman, yep, him again, he's the MVP of facial expressions, discovered this distinction while studying emotion and deception. His research found that real smiles are incredibly hard to fake convincingly because we have much less voluntary control over the eye muscles. So the next time someone grins at you but their eyes look like they're calculating your expiration date, trust your gut. You might find this surprising. Children as young as 4 can tell the difference between real and fake smiles. That means your niece has probably known you were faking delight at her puppet show long before you realized it. But, and here comes that scholarly gray area again, there remains considerable disagreement about whether people always need to crinkle their eyes to show genuine joy. Some researchers argue that with enough emotional practice, think actors, therapists, or customer service reps, people can learn to simulate the eye component well enough to fool even trained observers. So yes, that overly enthusiastic barista might actually be thrilled to give you your 6th iced oat milk latte today. Or their Oscar material. Let's pause on the social smile. This is the one you use every day, to be polite, to blend in, to navigate awkward elevator rides. It's not necessarily fake, but it's not deeply emotional either. It says, I acknowledge you. Please let's not make this weird. Social smiles are part of the oil that keeps daily interactions running smoothly, especially in formal or unfamiliar settings. But then there are the sinister smiles. Just a quirky detail, there's a facial expression known as the duping delight smile. It's that slight grin someone gives when they think they're getting away with something. It can pop up when someone lies successfully or manipulates a situation to their advantage. Creepy, right? Your face has its own way of celebrating deception, often before your conscience even finishes writing the memo. And now, let's drift into the role of culture again. In some cultures, smiling is encouraged at every turn. Think of Americans, often stereotyped for their big, bright, customer service smiles. In other places, like Russia or parts of Scandinavia, smiling without a good reason can be seen as fake or even suspicious. So while you might think someone's being cold, they might just be culturally programmed to save smiles for moments of real emotional weight. Here's something interesting. Research shows that people who smile more often in social situations are generally perceived as more competent and trustworthy, but only up to a point. Smile too much, and you risk coming off as unserious or naive. It's a delicate balance. Like seasoning your pasta sauce, too little, it's bland. Too much, and you're just eating oregano soup. Now, let's shift a little. You're smiling, maybe because you're amused, maybe because it's reflexive. But that smile? It actually does more than signal how you feel. It changes how you feel. This is the facial feedback loop in action. When you smile, even a forced one, your brain gets the message that you're feeling okay. Endorphins may get released. Your heart rate might slow. And that, mood lifts, just a notch. It's one of the easiest, cheapest mood boosters out there. And if you've ever smiled just to get through a tough day, you've tapped into this without even knowing. It's like biohacking your way to emotional stability. Side effects may include strangers thinking you're too cheerful and avoiding eye contact. Let's talk about smiling in conflict. Smiling doesn't always mean joy. It can signal nervousness, submission, or even passive aggression. Ever been in an argument and found yourself smiling involuntarily? That's your body trying to diffuse tension before things go full-blown emotional fireworks. Smiles can de-escalate, but also confuse. Especially when your words say one thing, and your face says, I'm fine, with that terrifying too wide grin. A long-standing controversy surrounds whether smiling makes people appear more or less dominant. In some cases, a warm smile establishes leadership and ease. In others, especially in competitive or masculine-coded environments, it might be seen as a sign of weakness. Context is everything. Smiling at a baby? Lovely. Smiling in a court deposition? Probably not the move. Here's one more wild tidbit. Blind people, even those born blind, smile when they're happy. That's compelling evidence that smiling isn't learned from visual imitation. It's built into our emotional hardwiring. It's a reflex. A signal. A legacy from the deep, ancient parts of your brain. So next time someone flashes a smile, don't just look at their mouth. Look at their eyes. Listen to your gut. Ask yourself, is that joy? Is that social survival? Or is that something else entirely? As your awareness deepens, you start to feel the ripple effect of your own expressions, the tiny upturn of your lips influencing how others react, how rooms shift, how conversations unfold. And just like that, your hands begin to stir, gesturing softly, fiddling, translating thought into motion. What do your hands say, even when your mouth stays shut? Your hands are talking, even when you're not. They move without permission, sketching shapes in the air, emphasizing your words, betraying your mood, and, sometimes, revealing more than you intended. You're probably unaware of it most of the time, but the moment you become still, consciously still, you realize just how much your hands are always busy. Fidgeting, pointing, waving, clenching, opening, they're in constant dialogue with the world around you. And unlike your carefully chosen words, hand movements often bypass filters. They're impulsive. Honest. Sometimes a little awkward. But always full of meaning. Think of gestures, the way you naturally punctuate your speech by chopping the air, holding out a palm, or pinching your fingers together like an exasperated Italian grandmother. These aren't just theatrical flourishes. They're embedded tools for processing and conveying thought. Some cognitive scientists even argue that gestures help you think. That's right, when you wave your hands while talking, you're not just performing. You're literally organizing your ideas in real time. Here's something interesting. Researchers at the University of Chicago found that people who gesture while solving math problems perform better than those who don't. The body and brain are co-authors in your problem-solving process. So yes, all that flailing during a brainstorming session? Totally valid. But here's the twist. While hand gestures can enhance understanding, they can also completely contradict your spoken words. If someone says, "I'm totally calm," while tightly clenching their fists or tapping their fingers like they're trying to Morse code an escape plan, which message are you more likely to believe? You might find this surprising. People are generally more trusting of gestures than of verbal explanations. Why? Because gestures feel harder to fake. They're immediate and less processed, bypassing the usual linguistic self-editing that speech allows. When your words say one thing and your hands say another, most people, whether they realize it or not, believe your hands. A long-standing controversy surrounds the classification of gestures themselves. Are they a separate language? Just tools of emphasis? Or perhaps a blend of both? Some researchers argue for a gesture-speech unity theory, which suggests that gestures and speech are not two systems, but two expressions of the same underlying thought. Basically, your hands aren't translating your words. They're expressing the same ideas, just through a different channel. Let's zoom in on the most basic yet loaded of all gestures, the open palm. It's ancient, primal, and powerful. An open hand says, "I'm not a threat." It invites trust. This gesture likely dates back to early human interactions when showing your empty hands was the only way to prove you weren't carrying a weapon. Fast forward to today, and politicians, teachers, and leaders still instinctively use open palm gestures when addressing groups. It calms the room. It draws people in. Contrast that with pointing. Pointing is direct, sometimes aggressive. It can command attention or trigger defensiveness. That's why people avoid being pointed at, especially in tense conversations. Pointing at yourself during speech, "I know I messed up," can communicate ownership. But point at someone else, you messed up, and well, you've probably just started an argument. And then there's the fist, clenched in anger, raised in protest, or pounded for emphasis. The same gesture can mean empowerment or aggression, depending on context. One hand movement, infinite meanings. The body doesn't deal in absolutes, it reads the room and adapts. Here's a quirky little tidbit. Some research suggests that people gesture more when they speak in a second language. Why? Because gestures help bridge the gap between internal thought and external expression. It's like giving your brain a little handheld megaphone when words alone don't quite cut it. And don't get me started on fidgeting. Twisting rings, drumming fingers, adjusting sleeves, these aren't just idle motions. They're often soothing behaviors that help regulate anxiety or overstimulation. They're called self-adapters, and they serve as a built-in nervous system reset button. You might tap your pen or rub your thumb across your knuckles without realizing it's your body's way of saying, "I'm trying to keep it together." But not all hand communication is conscious or voluntary. Ever heard of emblems? These are gestures with specific cultural meanings, like the peace sign, thumbs up, or the infamous middle finger. What's wild is that these symbols can mean completely different things around the world. The thumbs up may mean great in one country and something profane in another. So yes, your polite gesture might accidentally insult someone if you're not careful. There remains considerable disagreement about whether emblems are learned behaviors or shaped by deep cultural archetypes. Are we taught what they mean? Or do these symbols evolve over centuries in ways we can't fully trace? It's the kind of question that keeps cultural anthropologists up at night. Well, that and trying to decode what Gen Z's latest hand signals on TikTok actually mean. And let's not forget handshakes, those brief, socially loaded rituals that somehow contain entire conversations in the pressure and duration of a grip. A firm handshake implies confidence. A limp one suggests hesitation. An overly aggressive shake. You've just been introduced to a dominance display in action. Handshakes are so nuanced that some researchers consider them part of a touch language, where physical contact fills in emotional blanks. Just like with facial expressions, there's also the issue of congruence. When your hands move in harmony with your words, people trust you more. When they don't, like if you say something enthusiastic while your hands stay stiff or hidden, your message comes off as inconsistent. We sense something's off, even if we can't explain it. So the next time you talk, watch your hands. Are they reflecting your emotions? Emphasizing your meaning? Or are they giving away a truth you hadn't meant to share? As you drift further into this space of noticing, of tuning in, your awareness begins to drop even lower. Your shoulders relax, your spine unwinds, and suddenly you feel your posture, how you stand, sit, lean, revealing your presence long before your voice does. Your posture speaks before you do. It enters the room ahead of your words, announces your mood, and sometimes, even your status, without making a sound. You slouch, and someone sees disinterest. You straighten, and they sense confidence. You lean forward, and you seem engaged. You lean back, and suddenly you're detached, or worse, judging. It's subtle, but powerful. And once you start noticing it in yourself and others, it becomes impossible to ignore. Let's start with something you probably do more than you realize, the power pose. You might not strike a superhero stance in front of the bathroom mirror every morning, but think about how you sit in a meeting, or how you stand when you're waiting in line. Are your arms open? Your spine tall? Your legs spread just enough to take up space? That's your body expressing dominance, or at least trying to. Social psychologist Amy Cuddy made the power pose famous by suggesting that holding expansive postures can actually increase feelings of confidence and influence how others perceive you. The research sparked public fascination, and no shortage of TED Talks, but also stirred quite a bit of academic pushback. A long-standing controversy surrounds whether power posing truly boosts hormones or just temporarily alters subjective mood. Either way, the posture you take impacts how people respond to you. Here's something interesting: people are more likely to comply with a request, like signing a petition or helping with a task, when it's delivered by someone with upright, open posture. It's not just about being tall and proud. It's about the subtle perception of authority, warmth, and self-possession. Now, imagine someone walking into a room with their shoulders rounded, head down, and arms close to their sides. That posture screams low confidence, maybe even defeat. And if that person says, "I'm doing great," it clashes so hard with the body's message that it triggers instant suspicion. You don't believe them. Not because you want to be rude, but because your brain trusts the posture more than the words. This links back to the concept of embodied cognition, the idea that your thoughts and feelings are influenced by your physical state. So yes, your posture not only affects how people see you, it affects how you feel. Standing tall can make you feel more powerful. Hunching can make you feel small. Your body and brain are constantly feeding each other signals. You might find this surprising. Slouching has been linked in some studies to increased feelings of helplessness and even sadness. One experiment showed that people who maintained upright posture during a stressful interview reported feeling more alert and positive than those who slouched. Just sitting up a little straighter can shift your emotional baseline. But posture isn't just about emotions, it's also about space. Your body territory. In psychology, we call it expansiveness, how much physical space you occupy. Expansive postures, legs apart, arms resting wide, back straight, are often interpreted as high status. Contractive postures, legs crossed tightly, arms folded, shoulders hunched, read as submissive or anxious. And here's a quirky detail. In courtroom settings, jurors have been found to rate defendants with upright, relaxed postures as more trustworthy and credible. Meanwhile, defendants who slouch or avoid eye contact are often, unfairly, seen as deceptive or guilty. Your posture may not be on trial, but it's certainly being judged. That said, posture can also be weaponized. Think of someone towering over you during an argument. Standing too close. Puffing up their chest. These are dominance tactics. Subtle power plays. And even if the words are calm, your nervous system reads the threat in the posture. There remains considerable disagreement about how much posture is conscious versus automatic. Do you stand tall because you choose to? Or because you were taught that it projects strength? Is your slouch the result of laziness, or is it a protective posture shaped by years of social experience? The answer, of course, is somewhere in between. And posture isn't one size fits all. Cultural norms shape how people carry themselves. In some societies, high-status individuals adopt reserved, contained postures. Think of British royalty. In others, like the US or Brazil, confidence is often expressed through relaxed and open body language. So while a slouched pose may scream disinterest in one culture, it might signal modesty or humility in another. Here's a fascinating example. In Japan, bowing isn't just a greeting, it's a whole language of posture. The depth, duration, and angle of the bow all convey different messages. Respect. Apology. Gratitude. And it's practiced from childhood. That's posture, turned into art. Let's not forget transitional posture, those shifts we make when we're trying to decide how to feel. Ever catch yourself straightening up when someone walks in? Or adjusting your seat before you speak? Those mini postural tweaks are your body's way of managing impression. It's not quite posing. It's posturing. And yes, there's a difference. Posturing is intentional. Sometimes manipulative. It's when your body tries to broadcast something, rather than just feel it. Think of the guy who puffs his chest out in a bar, or the colleague who sits a little too confidently in meetings. Their bodies are performing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just makes you roll your eyes. But here's the kicker, even fake posture can lead to real psychological effects. That's right. If you fake it, your brain sometimes starts to make it. And the people around you? They respond to the image your body projects, even if it doesn't match the reality inside. So now, as you settle more deeply into this awareness of posture, yours, theirs, everyone's, you start to see it for what it really is, a quiet, steady pulse of personality and intent. A signal that never stops transmitting. And then, like a breath you didn't know you were holding, you notice space. The invisible buffer between you and others. How close is too close? How far is too cold? The next message comes not from movement or gesture, but from distance. You don't see it, but you feel it, that subtle barrier of space between you and another person. Step too close, and it's like you've triggered an alarm. Step too far, and you feel the disconnect. This invisible boundary is called proxemics, and it's one of the most overlooked, but most powerful, forms of nonverbal communication. You already know the rules, even if you've never heard the term. You feel it in elevators, in coffee lines, at dinner parties. You've probably backed up slightly when someone leaned in too close, or felt awkward when someone stood too far away during a friendly chat. Proxemics is the dance of distance, and you've been doing it your whole life without even thinking about it. Let's break it down. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall was the first to define proxemics formally. He mapped out 4 basic spatial zones for social interaction, especially in Western cultures. Intimate distance, 0 to 18 inches reserved for close family, lovers, and the occasional toddler who doesn't understand boundaries. Personal distance, 1.5 to 4 feet friends, close colleagues, and people you're comfortable with. Social distance, 4 to 12 feet acquaintances, new colleagues, and that guy at the bank. Public distance, 12 plus feet speeches, performances, strangers in public spaces. Now, you might not carry a measuring tape, but your body knows these zones. And when someone violates them, your brain reacts instantly. Your heart rate may rise. Your shoulders may tighten. You might even subtly shift backward, trying to reclaim that bubble of space. Here's something interesting. Our sense of personal space is partly shaped by culture. In Mediterranean and Latin American countries, close contact is common, touching shoulders, hugging often, standing face to face during conversation. Meanwhile, Northern European and many East Asian cultures prefer more space, often reading closeness as intrusive. So while your attempt to get friendly by leaning in might be welcomed in Brazil, it might totally backfire in Finland. And don't even try it in Japan unless you're on a packed subway, where, interestingly, the cultural tolerance for cramped space is higher only because everyone agrees to silently ignore it. But there remains considerable disagreement about how universal these spatial preferences are. Some scholars argue that distance is biologically wired, an evolutionary holdover from our need to assess threats. Others believe it's entirely learned, shaped by social norms and environment. Either way, if you've ever felt weirdly uncomfortable talking to someone too close, that's your spatial intuition tapping on your shoulder. You might find this surprising. Even virtual proxemics is now a thing. In video calls, people tend to lean back more than they would in real life, creating a feeling of artificial distance. But when someone's face fills the screen, too close to the webcam, it can feel invasive, triggering the same fight or flight response you'd get if someone stood nose to nose with you at the grocery store. Welcome to the strange new frontier of Zoom etiquette. Let's not skip the emotional component. Personal space isn't just physical, it's emotional armor. When you're anxious or sad, you often crave more space. When you're happy or in love, you tend to shrink the distance. That's why a comforting hug feels so powerful. It's not just touch, it's the full surrender of spatial boundaries. And just a quirky detail, animals have proxemic behavior too. Birds will space themselves evenly on a wire. Dogs often approach each other in wide arcs, not head-on. Even fish maintain respectful swim distances in a tank. Space isn't just human, it's deeply social across species. Proxemics also intersects with power. High-status individuals are often more comfortable invading others' space. Think of a boss who walks behind your desk and leans over your shoulder. Or someone who spreads their belongings across shared space in a meeting room. It's a nonverbal claim to territory, intentional or not. Conversely, people with less perceived power tend to shrink their space. They sit with their limbs close, avoid encroaching, and often yield when space is contested. This can be deeply unconscious, especially for those trained from an early age to avoid confrontation. The body learns to take up less room as a form of social survival. And then there's gender. Studies show that women are often more likely to experience frequent violations of personal space, especially from men. This can range from slightly too close conversations to full-on discomfort in public settings. That's why spatial dynamics aren't just etiquette, they can also reflect deeper social tensions. Let's talk about touch, since we're here. Physical contact is the ultimate space crosser. A hand on the shoulder. A hug. A casual brush of the arm. These are loaded gestures. In the right context, touch can comfort, reassure, or build connection. In the wrong context, it can feel invasive or even threatening. There remains ongoing debate among psychologists about the boundaries of appropriate touch. What's considered friendly in one setting might be seen as pushy in another. Even the duration of a touch can completely alter its meaning. One study found that a handshake lasting just 2 seconds longer than normal was enough to make participants feel uneasy, even if the touch was gentle. And speaking of touch, did you know that brief, appropriate physical contact can increase compliance? Servers who lightly touch a customer's hand while returning change are more likely to get a tip. But go too far? Instant discomfort. The body reads touch with a hypersensitive radar. So what can you take from all this? Simply this: your awareness of space, yours and others, is a powerful part of how you communicate. It signals safety, intimacy, dominance, or distance. It tells people where they stand with you, literally and emotionally. As you absorb that thought, notice your own sense of space. Where do you feel safe? When do you pull back? When do you lean in? And as your attention lowers, like a tide easing out, you begin to notice something even subtler, movements you almost never monitor. The ones you usually ignore because they're happening below eye level. But they speak volumes, too. It's time to talk about your feet. You've probably never thought of your feet as part of a conversation. I mean, they're way down there, doing their thing, quietly supporting your every step while the rest of your body gets all the spotlight. But guess what? Your feet are some of the most honest parts of you. They're like your emotional early warning system, shy but brutally truthful. While your face is practicing its social masks, your hands are gesturing politely, and your voice is saying all the right things, your feet are just being real. No filter. No manners. Just pure, subconscious signaling. Let's begin with something simple: foot direction. You might not notice it, but when you're engaged in a conversation, your feet tend to point toward the person you're focused on. When you're trying to leave, or not interested, your feet often shift subtly toward the exit, or away from the speaker. They're planning the escape long before your brain gives you permission. Here's something interesting: researchers call this the foot cue. It's one of the most reliable indicators of interest versus disinterest. During social experiments, people in conversations often maintained eye contact and polite body language, but their feet told a different story, angled toward the nearest door, hallway, or even another person across the room. Their social brain said, "Stay here and nod," but their feet whispered, "Run." You might find this surprising. Even toddlers will instinctively turn their feet away from something or someone they don't like. It's part of our ancient, hardwired response system. Feet are about action. And action starts with intention. So when someone's feet are pointed elsewhere, they're already halfway out of the interaction, whether they know it or not. Now let's talk about fidgeting. Feet tapping, leg bouncing, shifting weight back and forth. These are all signs of nervous energy, boredom, or restlessness. You're waiting for an interview and your leg starts jiggling like it's had too much espresso. You're sitting through a meeting and your feet start bouncing like they're dancing to a silent beat. These aren't random habits. They're leaks. Little leaks of unspoken tension. And just a quirky detail: in studies on lying behavior, liars often exhibit more lower body movement than truth tellers, especially if they're not trained to control their body language. While someone's upper half might stay calm, their feet may start twitching, shifting, or retreating. That's why trained investigators don't just look at facial expressions, they look at what the lower half is doing, too. But here's where it gets more subtle: foot placement also conveys attitude. Standing with feet shoulder width apart communicates confidence and balance. Crossed ankles while standing can suggest passivity, nervousness, or deference. One foot behind the other, weight shifted to the back leg? That's classic hesitation. And yes, foot mirroring is a real thing. When people are genuinely connecting, their feet often begin to unconsciously mimic each other's position. It's called synchronous body language, and it builds rapport. If someone mirrors your stance, feet included, it's a good bet they're comfortable with you. There remains considerable disagreement, though, about whether people can be trained to accurately read foot language or whether it requires a more intuitive, situational approach. Some experts argue it's too subtle and varies too much across contexts. Others believe that, with practice, even foot cues can become powerful tools for reading the room. Think about crossed legs. They can mean a lot of things, depending on the direction and context. Crossed away from someone might signal discomfort or disengagement. Crossed towards someone often means interest or trust. But throw in cultural norms, and the water gets muddy. In some cultures, showing the sole of your foot is deeply disrespectful. So that casual ankle cross you thought was relaxed might come off as rude somewhere else. Here's another layer. Seated posture and leg movement can signal dominance or submission. Someone sprawling with legs wide in a meeting? That's not just comfort, that's a display. In psychology, it's called expansive posture, and it's often a nonverbal claim to space and power. Conversely, tightly crossed legs, tucked feet, or sitting on one foot can all suggest the opposite, an effort to take up less space, to disappear slightly. Let's take this to the workplace. Have you ever been in a presentation where someone looked engaged from the waist up, but their feet were twisted toward the door, crossed away, or constantly moving? Chances are, they were mentally somewhere else. Or maybe they were uncomfortable, distracted, or quietly disagreeing. And your body caught it, maybe not consciously, but it filed that information somewhere under things that felt off. One study even found that interviewers were more likely to rate candidates favorably if their feet and legs remained calm and still during the session. Excessive foot tapping or leg shifting was subconsciously interpreted as anxiety, unreliability, or lack of confidence, even when everything else was on point. Brutal? A little. But that's the power of subtle nonverbal cues. And then there's walking. Your gait, the rhythm, speed, and bounce of your step, is a form of nonverbal communication too. A fast, purposeful walk can signal confidence or urgency. A slow, dragging step. Low energy, sadness, or hesitation. People often judge others' emotional states based on how they walk, without ever realizing they're doing it. And just a quirky little fact, in some security and behavioral profiling systems, foot placement and leg movement are analyzed for potential threats. Someone loitering with one foot pointed outward might be ready to bolt. Law enforcement agencies are trained to spot these cues in high-stakes environments, because feet, unlike faces, are rarely trained to lie. So, what can you do with this knowledge? First, become aware of your own feet. Notice where they point in conversations. Track your leg movements when you're anxious or bored. Try mirroring someone's stance gently and see if it shifts the tone of the interaction. Second, start observing others, not in a judgmental way, but in a curious one. Look for when foot signals match the words and when they contradict. Those moments of mismatch. They're gold. The lower half of your body might be quiet, but it's not silent. It's whispering all the time, about how you feel, what you want, and whether you're ready to stay or go. As that thought settles, you begin to see the bigger picture. If even your feet can talk, then how do people from other cultures hear those signals differently? What does body language mean when it crosses oceans and borders? Let's stretch the lens now, farther than your immediate circle, farther than your hometown, maybe even farther than your comfort zone. Because while your body might speak fluently in the language of gestures and expressions, that dialect can shift dramatically the moment you cross a cultural border. You see, not all body language means the same thing around the globe. That smile you flash in a grocery store might earn you a friendly nod in one country, or make someone else deeply uncomfortable in another. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of cross-cultural nonverbal communication. Let's start with a classic, eye contact. In the United States and much of Western Europe, steady eye contact is seen as a sign of confidence, respect, and sincerity. But shift eastward, and you'll find a different code. In countries like Japan or South Korea, too much eye contact can be viewed as rude, aggressive, or even confrontational, especially with authority figures. So while you might think someone is being evasive or unfriendly because they're not looking you in the eye, they might actually be showing deference. A quiet kind of respect that just happens to violate your expectations. Here's something interesting: even smiles aren't universal in meaning. In many parts of the US, smiling is part of the social lubricant. It's offered freely, even to strangers. But in places like Russia, people generally reserve smiles for close relationships and genuine emotions. A smile without context might be seen as superficial or suspicious. You might think you're being warm. They might wonder what you're hiding. And gestures? Oh boy. Let's talk about the okay sign, thumb and index finger touching to form a circle. In the US, it means all good. In Brazil, however, that same gesture can be extremely offensive. A peace sign is harmless in most places, but turn your palm inward in the UK or Australia, and you've just delivered a historic insult. Just a quirky detail, even nodding doesn't always mean yes. In Bulgaria and parts of Greece, nodding up and down can mean no, while shaking your head side to side means yes. Try wrapping your brain around that one when you're ordering lunch in Sofia. There remains considerable disagreement among researchers about whether any nonverbal expressions are truly universal. While emotions like fear, anger, and happiness have been shown to have similar facial expressions across cultures, interpretation still varies. A smile of embarrassment in one place might be mistaken for smugness somewhere else. Even basic gestures like touching your heart or waving can get lost, or totally twisted, in translation. Think about personal space again. As we explored earlier, proxemics shifts dramatically across cultures. South Americans and Middle Easterners often stand closer during conversation, while Scandinavians and Japanese prefer more distance. What feels just right in one place can feel suffocating or cold in another. Now imagine walking into a room for a business meeting in France. The expectation might be a kiss on each cheek, la bise, as a greeting. You lean in awkwardly, unsure which side to start with, terrified you're about to kiss your boss. Meanwhile, your German colleague offers only a firm handshake and a precise nod. The room suddenly feels like a nonverbal chess match, and no one gave you the rulebook. Here's another fun one. In India, a head wobble, something between a nod and a shake, can mean yes, maybe, or I hear you, depending on context and subtlety. If you're not used to it, you'll find yourself mentally screaming, what does that even mean? But once you learn the rhythm, it becomes second nature. And let's not forget how emotional restraint differs across the globe. In many East Asian cultures, maintaining harmony and avoiding overt displays of emotion is a social goal. That means less gesturing, more neutral facial expressions, and controlled posture. In contrast, cultures in Southern Europe or Latin America often encourage expressive body language. Big gestures. Dramatic tones. Faces that wear their emotions out loud. You might find this surprising. Some cultures even train people from a young age to minimize or mask emotional expressions. In China, for example, smiling in public when feeling frustrated may be seen as polite. It's not about deception, it's about maintaining face, a concept that values dignity and social harmony over personal expression. And that leads us to the idea of contextual cues. In high-context cultures, like Japan, Korea, or the Arab world, much of the meaning in communication is derived from nonverbal signals, shared understanding, and relationship history. People rely on tone, pauses, and subtle gestures. Words are just the beginning. In contrast, low-context cultures, like the US, Germany, or Scandinavia, favor direct, explicit communication. Here, clarity is key, and gestures are more often used to reinforce the literal message rather than replace it. So what does this mean for you? It means that interpreting body language isn't just about reading signals, it's about knowing the culture those signals are rooted in. That innocent hand gesture you use to show excitement? It could offend someone in another country. That firm eye contact you rely on for trust building? It could alienate someone who sees it as disrespectful. It also means that traveling, or even working in a multicultural team, requires a kind of nonverbal humility. You have to pause, observe, adapt. Let go of the assumption that your body language is the default, or right, way to communicate. There's beauty in that, though. It reminds you that communication is a shared experience, not a one-size-fits-all script. You learn to listen not just with your ears, but with your eyes, your awareness, your patience. So the next time you feel like someone's giving off a weird vibe, ask yourself, is it them? Or is it just a different nonverbal dialect? As your thoughts drift now into the quiet realization that signals can be misread so easily, another layer of complexity begins to rise. What happens when words and body language disagree? What happens when someone's saying all the right things, but their body just doesn't match? You've been there. Someone says, "I'm fine," but they won't meet your eyes, their shoulders are hunched, and their voice sounds thinner than usual. Everything in your body says, "No, you're not." And guess what? You're probably right. Because when verbal and nonverbal cues clash, most people instinctively trust the body over the words. This silent war between what's said and what's shown is known in psychology as nonverbal incongruence. It's like a glitch in the social matrix. Your brain picks up the mismatch, and suddenly you feel tense, confused, or just off. You might not be able to articulate why, but your instincts light up like a motion sensor in the dark. Here's something interesting. A study by Albert Mehrabian, yes, him again, suggested that when there's a conflict between spoken words and nonverbal communication, the nonverbal message is taken as more authentic. In emotional communication, he argued that 93% of the meaning is conveyed through nonverbal channels, facial expressions, tone, posture, and only 7% through the words themselves. Now, that specific breakdown has been debated for years. Yes, there remains considerable disagreement about the exact ratios and when they apply, but the takeaway is solid. When your body and your words disagree, people believe your body. Let's talk about some classic examples. Say you're giving a presentation. Your voice says you're excited, but your arms are stiff, your stance is closed, and your face is locked in neutral. The audience senses the tension. They might not know what's wrong, but the inconsistency creates cognitive dissonance. They feel uneasy, even if the slide deck is flawless. Or maybe you're having a one-on-one with someone. They say they're happy for you, but their smile doesn't reach their eyes, and their tone is just a little too flat. You walk away wondering, did I imagine that? No, you didn't. You picked up on a subtle contradiction. Your brain caught the lag between their mouth and their muscles. You might find this surprising. Children as young as 5 are able to detect when someone's body language doesn't match their words. In experiments, kids were shown videos of people speaking in upbeat voices while making sad or angry facial expressions, and they consistently judged the person as not really happy. So don't underestimate a kid's radar. Or yours, for that matter. The reason we trust body language more is evolutionary. In prehistoric times, being able to detect someone's true intent, despite what they were saying, was a survival skill. If a tribe member said, "I come in peace," but had a clenched jaw and a spear behind their back, well, you'd want to catch that before it was too late. Let's zoom in on tone of voice, one of the biggest culprits in mixed messaging. You can say, "I love you," with warmth, sarcasm, boredom, or threat, depending entirely on your tone. And if your face and voice don't match the emotional content of your words, the message gets muddled. Or worse, manipulative. Just a quirky detail. There's a term for people who consistently mismatch verbal and nonverbal cues. It's called nonverbal leakage. It usually happens when someone is trying to deceive or mask a strong emotion. The truth leaks out, not in their sentences, but in their body's involuntary tells. Think of it as emotional subtitles you can't turn off. And it's not just deception. People also experience leakage when they're emotionally overwhelmed, like when someone tries to appear calm during a breakup, but their lips tremble or their hands shake. You say, "I'm okay," but your body calls your bluff. Loudly. So what should you do when you detect this kind of incongruence in others? First, don't assume deception right away. Mixed signals aren't always about lying. Sometimes they reflect inner conflict, confusion, or discomfort. Your friend might say they're happy for your promotion while their body registers envy. Doesn't mean they don't love you. Just means they're having multiple emotional experiences at once. And who hasn't? Second, look for clusters of cues. One mismatched gesture might mean nothing. But a pattern of disconnected signals, like crossed arms, fake smiles, stiff posture, and minimal eye contact, tells a more complete story. It's about the whole dance, not just one misstep. And here's where it gets trickier. Sometimes you are the one sending mixed messages. You say, "I'm interested," while checking your phone. You tell your team you're confident in their plan, but you don't make eye contact. You apologize, but your arms stay crossed. Oops. Your body just overruled your mouth. The good news? Awareness is curative. Once you start paying attention to these mismatches, you can correct them. It's not about being perfect, it's about being congruent. When your body matches your words, people trust you more. You appear authentic, grounded, believable. A long-standing controversy surrounds whether training people to monitor and correct their nonverbal behavior leads to genuine change or simply better acting. In other words, can you fake authenticity through body language? Some say yes, it's about practice. Others argue that authenticity can't be faked, and trying to control every signal leads to robotic communication. You can probably guess where this lands: balance. Awareness is great. Overanalysis? Not so much. You don't want to be that person who's so hyper-aware of their hands, tone, and feet direction that they can't finish a sentence without a panic attack. So, here's a better approach: focus on alignment, not perfection. When your emotions, intentions, and body language are in sync, the message lands clean. When they're not, when your words say, yes, but your energy screams, no, that tension gets transmitted, whether you like it or not. As your mind turns this over, you begin to recognize that all communication, verbal or not, is a kind of performance. Some performances are honest. Some are rehearsed. And some are silent power plays. Next, we step into the realm of dominance and submission. The world of body language where people don't ask for power, they just claim it, with a single movement. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it leans back in a chair, spreads out on a sofa, or simply takes a little too long to respond. Body language isn't just about feelings, it's also a battleground for status, dominance, and submission. And here's the wild part: much of it happens without a single word. You don't need a crown to signal authority. You just need a confident stance, a well-placed pause, and the subtle ability to take up space without asking for permission. That's the quiet language of nonverbal power, and you're reading it all the time, whether you realize it or not. Let's begin with space. As we touched on earlier, expansiveness is one of the most primal ways to assert dominance. When someone spreads out, feet planted wide, arms draped over nearby chairs, phone and keys scattered on the table, they're making a claim. They're saying, "I belong here. This is mine." That's not just comfort. It's territorial. Now contrast that with someone who keeps their arms close, legs crossed, belongings neatly tucked away. This contracted posture often signals submission or deference. It's like whispering with your body, "I don't want to make waves." You might find this surprising. Dominant body language can override verbal communication. Someone might speak softly, even kindly, but if their body exudes power, direct gaze, controlled gestures, stillness, they're still read as an authority figure. Their confidence lands, even if their volume doesn't. There's a particularly potent power cue in stillness. The more someone feels in control, the less they fidget. They don't need to bounce their knees or play with their sleeves. Stillness communicates certainty, and in high-stakes settings, that calmness draws attention. The room waits for them to speak. When they finally do, the silence beforehand made their words more impactful. Here's something interesting. Research shows that leaders who use fewer but more deliberate gestures are perceived as more powerful. Too much movement can dilute authority. But a slow, open hand when making a point? That lands like punctuation. And then there's eye contact, the ultimate nonverbal chess move. Dominant individuals hold eye contact longer, and they're more comfortable initiating and maintaining it. They don't flinch. They don't look away quickly. They command the gaze, not in a stare down, but with a quiet insistence that says, I'm here. And I see you. But, and here's the balance, too much eye contact can backfire. It can tip into aggression. That's why power isn't just about owning space, it's about modulating it. Knowing when to expand and when to contract. When to move forward and when to lean back. Let's talk about interruptions. In conversations, dominant individuals often interrupt more, not always rudely, but with the confidence that their words have weight. They may also resume speaking after interruptions more easily. Submissive communicators, on the other hand, tend to yield. They let others talk, nod more frequently, and hesitate before responding. Just a quirky detail, in group settings, people unconsciously orient their bodies, feet, torso, even knees, toward the perceived leader. It's like a magnetic pull. No one says, let's turn toward Brenda. It just happens. The body recognizes who holds influence and adjusts accordingly. There remains considerable disagreement about whether these power behaviors are innate or learned. Some argue that assertive body language is hardwired from childhood, especially in individuals with dominant temperaments. Others believe these behaviors are shaped by social conditioning, encouraged in some groups, discouraged in others. Gender plays a major role in this debate. Take the example of a woman who spreads out in a meeting, uses strong eye contact, and speaks with assertive gestures. She might be read as confident, or bossy. Meanwhile, a man doing the same might be seen as simply owning the room. These double standards don't just live in language. They live in the body, too. Posture can also become a ritual of rank in organizations. Think about who sits where in a meeting. Who speaks first? Who gestures freely and who keeps still? Power doesn't always walk into the room, it sometimes just shifts chairs. And here's something subtle but powerful, the elevator effect. Ever notice that in small, enclosed spaces like elevators or small conference rooms, people instinctively adjust their body language to mirror social hierarchy? The most powerful person often stands more relaxed, takes up more room, while others might hold their bags tighter, avoid eye contact, or fold their hands. Nobody talks about it, but everyone feels it. Power can also be projected through touch. A hand on the back. A quick pat on the arm. These touches, when used strategically, imply control. They say, I have permission to enter your space. Of course, context is everything. In professional settings, the line between confidence and creepiness is thin. Touch too much or too familiarly, and dominance becomes discomfort. Here's a fascinating example. In primate societies, the alpha often walks slower, not faster. Why? Because rushing implies urgency, which suggests you're reacting to others. True dominance is unhurried. Deliberate. This translates into human behavior, too. Someone who moves slowly and confidently, pausing before answering, walking with control, often commands more attention than someone rushing to get a word in. You can actually test this. Next time you're in a group conversation, try pausing before you speak. Don't fidget. Don't fill the silence. Just hold your space and wait. You'll find people lean in. They expect you to say something meaningful, just because your body didn't rush. But remember, power isn't always about taking. It can also be about holding steady. A true signal of nonverbal authority is being able to make others feel safe in your presence, not dominated, but grounded. Power and warmth are not opposites. They're complementary forces. Think of your favorite mentor. Chances are, they didn't need to perform dominance. Their presence was enough. So, what does all this mean for you? It means your body is capable of signaling authority without arrogance. presence without pressure. The way you enter a room, hold your frame, and use your space tells others what to expect, and how to treat you. As your awareness of these cues grows, so does your ability to navigate them. To see them in others. To modulate your own. Because the ultimate body language power move isn't just about commanding others, it's about understanding yourself. And now, with all these signals floating around, you begin to wonder, how do people learn to read this invisible language better? And if they can read you, are you being read right now? Let's pause for a second, just long enough to notice something you don't usually pay attention to: how often you read people. You do it every day, almost constantly. You glance at someone's face and know they're annoyed. You sense a friend is distracted before they even open their mouth. You feel a shift in a room before anyone speaks. Welcome to the world of social perception, where your brain is quietly decoding nonverbal signals with shocking speed. The better you are at reading others, the smoother your relationships tend to be. Conversations flow more easily. Conflicts are dodged before they erupt. You say the right thing at the right time, not because you guessed, but because you noticed the clues their body already gave away. But here's the flip side: while you're reading others, they're reading you, too. Let's start with you as a decoder. People who are more emotionally intelligent tend to pick up on nonverbal cues faster. They catch the moment someone shifts uncomfortably. They see the forced smile. They notice the hesitation before the yes. And often, they adjust, modulating their tone, offering space, asking the better question. There's even a term for this sensitivity: nonverbal intelligence. It's not the same as IQ. It's more about attunement, your ability to pick up on and interpret silent messages. And like any skill, it can be trained. In fact, therapists, detectives, and even customer service reps often undergo specific training to read body language more accurately. Here's something interesting. Research shows that people who spend time in diverse social environments, where communication norms vary, develop sharper nonverbal skills. Why? Because they have to. The brain adapts to survive socially, learning to read subtle cues in unfamiliar terrain. Just a quirky detail: flight attendants are trained to spot anxiety not by what you say, but by what you do. Rapid blinking, clenched fists, white knuckles gripping the armrest, they see it all. Your mouth might say, "I'm good," but your body's in full turbulence. Still, there remains considerable disagreement about how reliable nonverbal reading really is. Some researchers argue that our gut instincts about body language are often riddled with bias: cultural, gendered, and personal. For example, someone crossing their arms might just be cold, not closed off. A blank expression might mean "I'm thinking," not "I'm mad." Context is everything. So while becoming a better reader is powerful, it comes with responsibility. You have to check your interpretations, not just assume them. That woman pacing the hallway might be nervous, or just getting steps in on her fitness tracker. You never really know unless you ask, gently. But let's flip the mirror. You're not just the reader, you're also the signal. Every movement, every shift in tone, every pause is being picked up and processed by the people around you. They may not be trained experts, but they're still forming impressions in milliseconds. You might find this surprising. Studies have shown that people form first impressions based on body language within 7 seconds, and often much faster. Your posture, your handshake, your smile, they don't just introduce you. They define you, at least initially. And once someone's formed that impression, it tends to stick. It's called the primacy effect. Your first silent message becomes the lens through which all your future communication is filtered. If you're perceived as warm, people will interpret your future words more generously. If you're seen as closed off or arrogant, even your kindest comments may be questioned. So how do you manage what your body is saying? Start with awareness, not overcorrection. Watch how you enter a room. Notice your default posture when you're tired or stressed. Listen to your voice when you're pretending to be okay. Ask yourself, does what I feel match what I'm showing? The goal isn't to fake confidence or force connection. It's to find alignment. When your words, voice, and body move together, people trust you. They feel safe. They stop analyzing and start listening. And here's a powerful trick: mirroring. When you subtly mirror someone's posture, gestures, or tone, you build instant rapport. It's like saying, "I'm with you," without actually saying anything. Salespeople use it. Therapists use it. Friends do it naturally. But it's most effective when it's genuine, when you're actually tuned in, not just performing. Let's not forget vulnerability as a form of nonverbal communication. Relaxed posture, soft eye contact, a steady tone, these can be as impactful as any persuasive speech. You don't have to take up all the space. Sometimes, letting someone else lead with their signals tells them you trust them. And that builds connection faster than any flashy gesture ever could. And if you're feeling misunderstood? Sometimes the issue isn't your words, it's your nonverbal leakage. You say you're open, but your arms are crossed. You say you're listening, but your body is turned halfway toward the door. These contradictions are fixable. And once you're aware of them, you start catching them in real time. Here's a tiny reset exercise. Next time you're in a tense or important conversation, take a deep breath and drop your shoulders. Uncross your arms. Plant your feet. Turn your body fully toward the person you're with. It sends a strong message: I'm here. I'm listening. I'm safe. Even if you say nothing at all, the body delivers it. So yes, you're being read. Constantly. But the good news? You can guide the story. You can adjust the tone. Clear up the misunderstanding. Amplify your authenticity. Not by faking a smile or practicing your power stance in the mirror, but by noticing and choosing. As your awareness sharpens, your interactions become smoother. You say less, but communicate more. You hear more, even in silence. And now, you begin to sense something even deeper: emotion, not just in words or expressions, but in motion itself. Let's move beyond the gestures, the smiles, and even the eye contact, into a deeper rhythm, one you don't always notice, but feel constantly. Your emotions aren't just felt inside you. They move. Through you. Out of you. Around you. The truth is, emotion isn't just a feeling, it's motion, quite literally. When you're angry, your chest tightens, your shoulders rise, your hands clench. When you're sad, you slump, your feet drag, your breath slows. When you're elated, your limbs feel lighter, your body sways, your energy expands outward like a breeze rippling through a field. Your body becomes emotion in motion. This connection is known in psychology as somatic expression, the idea that emotions are stored and expressed in the body, not just the brain. It's why you can feel joy in your limbs or grief in your bones. The body doesn't wait for permission to react. It does it before words even arrive. Here's something interesting. Researchers studying trauma have found that unprocessed emotional experiences can become physically stored in the body. In fact, body-based therapies like somatic experiencing focus on helping people release tension, anxiety, and fear by gently guiding physical responses rather than talking through them. The body keeps the score, literally. You might find this surprising. Emotions can even be identified by how you walk. A study showed that participants could recognize sadness, anger, and joy based on gait alone, without seeing facial expressions or hearing any words. Just the way someone moved across a room was enough to reveal their inner world. Movement carries messages, whether you intend to send them or not. Let's talk about tempo. Fast, sharp movements, jerky hand gestures, brisk pacing, often signal anxiety, stress, or urgency. Slow, fluid motions suggest calm, openness, or sometimes sadness. When someone's hand glides instead of jolts, or when they pause between gestures, it tells you they're settled. Present. Or at least trying to be. But movement is more than communication, it's also emotional regulation. Ever notice how pacing helps you think when you're upset? Or how shaking out your arms or walking away from an argument makes you feel clearer? That's your body's built-in pressure release. You're literally moving through the emotion. A long-standing controversy surrounds the idea that body movement alone can change emotional state. While some researchers support the facial feedback hypothesis, which we touched on earlier, others believe that posture, movement, and muscle activation have less to do with altering feelings and more to do with signaling readiness for change. In simpler terms, moving differently doesn't always make you feel different, but it opens the door. And sometimes, movement speaks when words won't. Think about grief. It often renders people speechless, but their bodies speak in other ways. The slow walk. The downward gaze. The folding inward. The person might not say, "I'm in pain," but their body radiates it like a low, invisible hum. Or take joy. It often comes bursting out of people as dancing, bouncing, hugging. It refuses to be still. It spills into space and wraps others up in its rhythm. Just a quirky detail, people who are deeply empathetic often catch the emotional movements of others. This is due to mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire not just when you move, but when you observe someone else moving. If you see someone cry, your own muscles may tense. See someone laugh? You feel that little pull in your cheeks, even if you don't join in. So yes, emotions are contagious. But not just emotionally, physically. You can catch someone's energy through their posture, gestures, even their breathing patterns. And if you're sensitive, you've probably felt drained after being near someone tightly wound, or uplifted after sitting beside someone who moved gently, openly. Let's not forget how music ties into this. When a beat hits just right, your body wants to move. That's no accident. Music activates motor areas of your brain, especially when it resonates with how you feel. The body becomes a mirror of emotion, even when it's someone else's song. Here's something simple you can try right now. Stand up. Drop your arms. Let them hang loose. Shake them out gently. Roll your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Just move, slowly, with awareness. Let your breath match your rhythm. You may not even realize how much tension you were holding until you begin to release it. This is why movement-based therapies, like yoga, dance therapy, and Tai Chi, aren't just about physical fitness. They're about expressing what your words won't or can't. They let you speak your emotional truth through motion. And then there's stillness, which is also a form of movement, just turned inward. In stillness, the body has its own quiet dance, a twitch of a finger, the rise and fall of your chest, the soft blink of your eyes. Stillness can express surrender, calm, or even resilience. Think of the last time you held someone's hand in silence. No words passed. No gestures. Just stillness. But the message? Loud. I'm here. You're not alone. So how can you become more aware of your emotional motion? Start by observing your body when you're feeling strong emotions. Notice where the tension lives. Do you cross your arms when angry? Tap your foot when anxious? Rock gently when nervous? These patterns aren't random. They're your body's emotional dialect. Then, watch others. Look past their words. Focus on how they move, or don't. The slumped shoulders, the twisting hands, the weight shifting from foot to foot. Emotion is constantly leaking through motion. Once you learn the rhythm, you won't be able to unhear it. And once you feel it, truly feel it, you begin to wonder, what if machines could feel it too? What if the way you move your face, your body, your breath, could be read by a camera or algorithm? And that, dear listener, leads us to a strange and rapidly evolving frontier, where psychology meets artificial intelligence. Where our nonverbal world is no longer just for people to interpret, but machines as well. The camera doesn't blink. The algorithm doesn't yawn. And the machine never forgets. Welcome to the eerie, fascinating crossroads where psychology and technology meet, the world of facial coding and emotion recognition AI. You've spent this entire journey learning how humans speak without words. Now imagine a system that not only listens to your face, but tries to understand it. Not just what you're saying, but what you're feeling, based on micro movements you don't even realize you're making. Sounds like science fiction? It's not. Facial coding has been around for decades. It began with psychologists like Paul Ekman, who developed the facial action coding system and #40, FACS and #41, a comprehensive method for categorizing every possible facial expression based on muscle movements. Think of it like sheet music for the face. Raise your inner brow. That's action unit 1. Pull your lip corners sideways. That's $12 Australian. Researchers used FACS to identify emotions in people across different cultures, especially the 6 so-called universal expressions: happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, disgust, and fear. It worked well enough that it was eventually adopted by everyone from airport security to political analysts. Here's something interesting. The CIA reportedly used facial coding to analyze world leaders' emotional states based on public appearances. So next time you see a diplomat on the news holding a neutral expression, somewhere, someone might be running their face through an algorithm to see what they're really feeling. Now enter AI. Today's machines can scan a face and map its expressions in milliseconds. Tools like Microsoft's Azure Emotion API or Effectiva's emotion recognition software can evaluate real-time video and assign emotional scores to a person's face. Not a mood ring, an emotional spreadsheet. And just a quirky detail, some shopping malls have installed emotion-detecting cameras to gauge how customers feel about store layouts or window displays. That glazed expression you had at the perfume counter? It got logged, scored, and filed. You might have just participated in facial analytics without ever knowing it. Of course, there remains considerable disagreement about the reliability and ethics of emotion-reading AI. Critics argue that while machines can detect expressions, they can't reliably interpret context. A furrowed brow might mean confusion, concentration, or that someone just has bad eyesight. Without understanding the bigger picture, the AI might label someone angry when they're just squinting at the sun. And there's the matter of privacy. Do you really want your emotions monitored every time you glance at your phone, walk through an airport, or attend a Zoom meeting? What happens when your facial data gets stored, analyzed, and possibly sold? Ethical debates aside, facial coding technology is growing fast. Some employers already use it in job interviews. The software tracks eye movement, smiles, brow raises, and speech patterns to assess confidence, honesty, and enthusiasm. Critics warn that this introduces bias and could misread neurodivergent behavior as deceptive or disengaged. There's also a growing concern about emotional surveillance. In places like China, some schools have experimented with classroom cameras that track student focus, using facial expressions and posture as indicators of attention. Imagine being a teenager and getting flagged by an algorithm for low engagement because you frowned while solving a math problem. On the flip side, there are potential upsides. For individuals who struggle to read emotions, such as people on the autism spectrum, facial recognition tools might offer real-time feedback, like a social GPS. A wearable device could help decode someone's expression, offering cues that the user might otherwise miss. In these cases, AI becomes less about intrusion and more about accessibility. You might find this surprising. Some therapists are now using AI to analyze patient sessions, measuring things like facial asymmetry, blink rates, and tone of voice to track emotional progress over time. The goal isn't to replace human intuition, but to support it, with data. Still, there's a fundamental tension in all of this. Human emotion is beautifully messy, layered, and often contradictory. Machines thrive on patterns. But you? You might feel 5 things at once. You might smile when you're nervous. You might cry from joy. You might freeze in fear but look calm on the outside. And that complexity? That's what makes you human. That's what makes nonverbal communication so rich, so hard to decode, and so worth learning. So as machines inch closer to reading us, it's a good time to sharpen your own ability to read, and be read. Because while AI might measure your blink rate, you still get to decide how present you are. How honest you are. How well you connect. Your body is a broadcast tower. It's always on. The question is, are you tuned in? And now, as your eyes grow heavier, your breath a little deeper, it's time to begin our slow, gentle descent into rest. Let yourself drift now. Slowly. Softly. Like a leaf settling onto still water. You've walked through the quiet language your body speaks every day. Through the flickers of your eyes, the curve of a smile, the position of your hands, the bend of your posture, the distance you keep, the subtle direction of your feet. And underneath it all, the rhythm of your emotion flowing through every movement, every breath, every moment of stillness. It's easy to overlook these things in the rush of life. Easy to miss the tension in a friend's shoulders, the tired blink of a coworker, the self-soothing fiddles of someone trying not to cry. But now, you know how to see it. You know how to listen, even when no one's speaking. Even more importantly, you understand what your own body has been whispering all along. So settle in. Let your own face relax. Let your shoulders drop. Let your feet stop planning where to go next. There's nowhere you need to be. No signal you need to send. Just stillness now. Just peace. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace. And if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. Sweet dreams.